start, shall we? So the last thing I remember you guys saw last week was I was showing like a very fuzzy view with a little bit of stale data. And so now what I'm going to show you is, um, let's see if I can get it all zeroed in correctly. Let me see what you guys see. So this I'm very excited about. So now we're trying a completely sort of different look. Same idea with the dots, where like we're looking at things as the drone would see them as data, and it's looking very data. And we have this stale data that you can see there. And the idea is that like I don't know. You can argue it either way, but like in my mind, what it is that we're trying to approximate two looks here. We're trying to get an alone in the dark feel that you get from like a spotlight, and we're also trying to give a very data driven look. So we've added in this sort of extra dimension, which is this stale data, as if you're mapping something. And my justification in my mind as to why it deteriorates is that you have this buffer of memory on the drone or on your ship or whatever, because this is old shitty tech, and it is keeping things as long as it can, but as you map new things, then that other stuff will deteriorate. And that's not exactly how it works right now, because it catches up to you when you stay still, in which case it wouldn't probably be deallocating that memory or whatever. But I think it gives a really cool look, and it really gives that sense that I'm sort of alone in the dark. And then you see how it's, you can't see where I'm pointing. You see how it's obviously like really bright in the areas that you are creating new data, and really darker. It's harder to see here. Basically, we can down res how much of the data that you see. But when I saw this is probably the most excited I've been with this new drone view, because I feel like this is getting us the data look that we're after. This is giving us that alone in the dark look, and this weird atrophying stale data is a weird look that I've never seen before, and it's creepy. So that being said, as soon as I showed this to people like Andrew, one of the qualms is that some of this, the removal of the stale data, is kind of it seems random, and also like it eliminates that really cool feeling that you're mapping the ship, right? And like some of the YouTube comments and stuff was like, wouldn't it be cool if that data stayed around, just looked less. Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm pretty proud of it, and by proud of it, I mean Jeremy Phillips has done an amazing job. This is like a classic example of me asking my only full-time engineer to rock on this stuff, deal with me art directing, and just make cool stuff that works in a game at runtime. So I'm actually pretty floored with what Jeremy's been able to do with the weird weird things I give him. So now let's look. Oh, so just for yucks and giggles, let's just look at. We just added a kind of sonar look. Um, which also gives a much more kind of sci-fi drone kind of vibe to it, as if we're pulsing out and we're getting stuff back. Now, there are small problems with this, like the fact that it's not, a sonar pulse that's like relative to anything. So like as you turn, it's obviously like sort of the effect is sort of parented to that and stuff like that. But at the same point in time, I don't really know that too many people will notice some of the gritty stuff that I get anal about when I'm art directing. So, it's a cool effect. So it might be something that we add in. One thing, just to be a complete nerd, well, let me see if I can make this smaller so you can see that edge. Yeah, okay. So if you, I'll stop it. Let me see. Hold on, right here. So one of the things that I'm absolutely in love with is that I asked Brendan to put some pipes along the wall, just so that we had something along the wall, because eventually there's going to be a bunch of empty space in the room, and we want to have things up against the walls if we can. If we have time, we can put bigger things in the middle of the room and have some more pathfinding for the drones and stuff, but for now at least, it's like some things up against the wall would be really cool. And I love these shapes that we're getting that don't look like necessarily pipes because, you know, we're hitting odd points and stuff like that. It's just kind of this really interesting. I think I'm obsessed with breaking up silhouette edges whenever I can, except on something clean like this. So I just think that that's a really cool look that I'm really happy with. This is actually a shader that is just does edge detection, and we're just kind of messing with it to make it noisier and stuff like that. And so, like, you know, we can obviously play with the normals of normal maps or whatever to get the look that we want. Um, um, yeah, the problem that I had before with the pulse, because we experimented with a pulse way back in the day, and it actually drove what you would see. And the problem was is if the pulse was too slow, then when you turn, you'd have to wait for the pulse. And you want to drive around these ships eventually, like once you get better at this. So you don't want to be waiting on the pulse. And then the second problem was is then if you increase the pulse to a rate where it worked, then the pulse was so fast that it like was annoying. And so because this pulse isn't actually tied completely to what you see, it's kind of fake, it kind of has the positive effects, which is it just feels like a pulse without the negative effects. But it's just something nice. So then what happened was is we were like, all right, so what if we kept around the stale data? What if we did map, let me see if I can do this right. What if you were mapping the ship, like one might expect, right? So let's take a quick look at this. So this, as you can see, all the stale data remains after you've mapped it. And also, because technically you're looking at a perspective camera, when you point the light at when you point the scanner, which is actually in a bunch of shaders sitting on top of a light, when you point it at things, and then you come at those same things from a different angle, they'll look differently because there is perspective, like slight perspective on this top-down camera. So it's interesting that when you are shooting this light around, the things underneath the light will actually update. And it might be hard to see here, but like the darker areas, the darker dots are stale data. And when you sweep over them, what you see underneath that will change because you're now looking at it from a different angle. And that's really cool because it gives it this really weird distorted effect. The other thing that's cool about this is that you start to, you immediately when you go into a room, know that you've been here before because the data is mapped. The things I don't like about it is you start to lose that alone in the dark feel because the attention is not as drawn to as not focused as much on the light because there's other data that's drawing your eye even though it's dark, and you know it's making you feel less alone in the dark even though that data is stale, so an enemy could be there and that might be extra creepy. That was kind of one of the issues that I had with this. So in order to solve that, we were like, well, maybe the problem is that we've got this huge giant beam and it maps things so quickly. Maybe if that was a smaller beam, it wouldn't quite be like that. So then we tried it with a small test cone. So as you can see here, if you can see it, what's going on here is that, and here, let me rewind it so you can really see, because it's a smaller area, you're really kind of sort of painting the scene and filling it in, this data, right? Which is cool in itself. It's always kind of fun to paint a scene with light and to like fill in the cracks, right? The problem that I have with this is that it starts to make you want to map the room, and it starts to make you like go around the whole room, and I don't know if that's like the main part of, even though that it's fun to make anything in your game fun, it detracts from sort of your real purpose, which is, yeah, you're searching around, but you're not trying to map the entire ship. This isn't like a sort of cartography mission. This is basically you're trying to survive and get rations and stuff like that. So I worry that the focus would be really pushed on Roomba-ing around every room, and that would get like kind of a little annoying. Another thing, back to what I was talking about with the stale versus spots, I don't know if this is going to jive, if this is going to make sense. It probably will. You guys are hip, and I'm okay at explaining things. Let Let me see if you can see. I don't know how bright your monitors are, so I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. But something that's interesting to me anyway is that if you look, so these are two images. This is when the light is pointing at what I call the spider. Here, let me show you this thing. So this is the actual one of the rooms that's actually in there. Well, no, it's not. But this is an asset that's in one of those rooms. I call it the spider engine. And it looks like it's some kind of like industrial engine type thing with some pipes coming off of it, but it looks sort of like a spider because it's got these three, legs coming off of it. So not too complicated. So now here is that same engine in this room, and you can see as our light shines on it, the effect that I want to have happening is happening, where you're like, what the hell is that? But I kind of get that it's some kind of structure and it's got these little things off of it, right? And that's kind of what I want. I want this kind of Rorschach-y kind of feel where you're like, I don't know exactly what that is, but it looks like it's kind of this. Now, if you look at it without the light, once it hasn't been painted, and this might be really difficult to see, and I apologize for that. I don't know if I can, I don't know if you can affect your brightness or whatever. But anyway, the point is that like you can still see it here, but these legs just turn into a bunch of dots. And that's because these legs have a lot of dots here, but because we're taking into account normals and how reflective these things would be with like if we were pulsing something, that these bright spots, these bright highlights are creating that definition of those legs, whereas that definition is completely gone when that's not on there. And that's a cool thing. But the problem is that then in the stale data, it just becomes a big mess. Which I actually think is kind of cool because you don't know exactly where the objects are, and if you want to go look at it, you'd need to turn this light back on it. But if we're bothering to do that, then we might as well make, if this noise is going to be less intelligible, and it's basically saying to us, you've been here before, then we could just reduce this noise a bit, and you'll see that like we're kind of trying to do that now. The new visual style kind of resembles Noct. That is an acronym, I'm assuming, for something that I can't think of at the moment. So then what we did was we were like, all right, what if this stale data, instead of just being the dots that it was, what if it was abstracted? Because we can't really make anything else out of this. And it's distracting from the cone of light, and it's too much stuff. So what if we made it more abstract? So then we were like, all right, let's try a grid. So let's try leaving behind a grid wherever you've mapped. And this is gonna, in theory, make the game world feel more computer, more like this thing is being mapped. Unfortunately, the color choice here is obviously, the other dots were a lot duller, and these colors aren't different. It would be much better if this was a very dull gray. But I think you can kind of already see, while interesting, it suffers from the same problem, where like we're mapping this thing, we're mapping this thing, this cone is really big, and then it just feels like we're moving around on this giant grid, and that's not as sexy as some of the earlier stuff. Yeah, so that's a problem. Hold on. Noct is actually the title, and it's an indie game that was on Kickstarter that I am unaware of, and I will go check that out. And thank you for that reference. So then this is too filled in. So then I was like, all right, well maybe the problem is that it's too filled in and it's the same color. So let's try instead of only making them little dots, little crosses, where those grids would intersect, and make them a different color so they're very distinguished, right? So here we have these green little pluses. The thing that I like about this is that those green little pluses do make me feel like, very much so, like I am charting out a space, and that this is starting to feel very data-driven to me, which is exciting. But again, this suffers from the exact same problem. The same problem where all of this fill, even though it's something completely different than what we're looking at, is detracting from that sense of being alone in the dark. It's detracting from that cone of light. a little bit, in my opinion. And so even though I think it's a really cool effect, it's problematic. Now, I do agree that if we made these instead of bright green, if we made them like very dull gray or something like that, we could start to get back to that. But I still think that it's just kind of um, just not working as well as we would hope, which is fine. This is why we kind of experiment with this. And so finally, where we're at now, this just came in, and I haven't really looked at it. This is an idea where it's like, and it's kind of hard to see, but the idea is that, and again, I guess we're back to this small cone for a little bit, but we still have the stale data that exists, but we have a lot more detail in the cone and a lot more sparse outside of the cone. So the idea would be is that there is stale data there that you can see, and that you know that when you come into this room, I've already been in this room. But because it's so sparse, it's now less distracting from the cone of that's being scanned, and more just simply representative that you've been here before. And so what we're hoping to do there, what we're trying to do there is create this balance of, if we have stale data, which I'm not completely convinced we need, but if we do have it, can we still get that alone in the dark, creepy feel that draws attention to the headlamp, to the scanner, while still indicating to the player, I've been here before, I've mapped this already, and that's why I see some of these dots in the background. And this, again, I apologize, some of this stuff could be very difficult to see, depending on your monitor and brightness settings and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's kind of the journey that we've come on in the last, all this stuff is in the last week. And the stuff prior, so in the last like 2 to 3 weeks, we've really kind of taken this data view, or this drone view, and made it a lot more data centric, and made it a lot look more like you are an operator that is seeing some kind of scientific visualization of the data. And that's kind of the idea.